So today I'm joined by Robert Demings. He's a tournament organizer based out of southern Georgia. He runs numerous Warhammer 40k tournaments, including grand tournaments, rogue trainer tournaments, and even team tournaments over the past several years. We'll be talking about everything from terrain to preparing to run a tournament, as well as actually executing the tournament. So Rob, how are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Trying to stay dry.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of inclement weather due to Tropical Storm Elsa or Hurricane Elsa, whatever she wants to call herself now. But just trying to stay dry, man.
So one of the questions I always like to ask people when I get them on the show is, what got you into Warhammer 40k in general, and then how did you get into running tournaments?
So that's a great story, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I'm sorry if I'm a little long-winded. My wife and I have been married for just over 8 years, and her father plays and had played for multiple editions, had won a bunch of different awards. He was a Gladiator winner at Adepticon and multiple Best in Appearance and whatnot, and had been trying to get me to play all through the time my wife and I were dating. And I kept saying, no, I've got a compulsive personality. I don't want to get into that. For our wedding present, he gave me the Dark Vengeance starter set, and I said, man, dang, now I'm stuck. So I've been playing since 6th edition, so since 2013, I went to all of these events. He and I started traveling to events like almost immediately. Later, it was I'd probably been playing 3 months before I went to my first tournament and placed not last. He was last, I was not, and I really enjoy it. I love meeting all these new people and learning, because I try to learn something from every person I play. And I've been to Nova and I've been to ATC several times and several GTs, and I said, man, I can do this. South Georgia has, especially with COVID, there's no one holding events in South Georgia with the exception of Moxie in Columbus, and they haven't been holding events because of COVID, so they haven't had anything for over a year. And I was lucky enough to get in with Halim at the Cool Place. He's a great guy and has an awesome venue. So if you're in the South Georgia area and you have a chance to run into the Cool Place, it's just over 10,000 square foot worth of floor space. But I was like, hey, take a chance on me. Let's get some 40K in the store, and we'll have tournaments, and people will come. If you let me host events, people will come, and the people have been coming. So as long as I end every tournament with the same thing, I'll keep holding events if you guys will keep coming. So they keep coming, so I have to keep going.
Yeah, I think the most recent tournament you had was a team tournament. How many people? Was it like 81 or something like that?
I had 28 three-man teams, so 84 players.
That's awesome.
84 players. It was absolutely awesome. Some great matchups and some awesome sportsmanship. Throughout the event.
Okay, so one of the things I want to start with first is kind of like big picture tournament organization, getting to the actual tournament. And I know one of the most contentious topics is terrain. And so my question for you is, how do you design tables of terrain with all the different opinions people have on the subject?
Well, and that's the hardest part, I think, of having a successful tournament. You have events like the London GT several years ago that had like no terrain at all, and people are always complaining about having to play on bare tables or planet bowling ball, and that's one thing I've tried to avoid with my events and all of my tables. And we've gone through really a lot of different terrain options. We've got a bunch of the old pro tabletop terrain sets, and those really aren't as good for 9th edition as they were for 8th due to the change in terrain rules. But I was lucky enough to pick up a ton of terrain from a guy that used to host events in Florida that didn't want to host events anymore and wanted his garage back. So I picked up close to 25 tables worth of terrain to add to what I already had. So basically what I do and it's a community, right? So I'll set up my table and I'll shoot a picture of it to another tournament or another TO in another area and say, hey, what do you think about this table? What's it look like to you? What have I missed? Are there fire lanes? Are there too many fire lanes? Are there not enough? What do you think I can add? I always make sure I have some form of line of sight blocking in the center. Um, but especially now with the objective rules, you can't just focus on how much terrain you have on the table. You also have to have it be able to shift to allow placement of objectives because they can't be in ruins anymore or in terrain, so you have to move them. So those are the things I have to worry about and I have to focus on. Terrain is by far one of the biggest headaches, and GW I think is on the right track with standardized terrains for their events. The roadshow, they've dropped the three terrain layouts for the roadshows, and some people argue that it's sparse. I think it's rather sparse personally. Some people argue you can't get knights through it or whatever. It doesn't matter. A good player will be able to circumnavigate that, right? But you got to have that happy medium between medium terrain and heavy. You got to have lots of varying from dense cover to light cover, obstacles and industrial. You got to have a little bit of all of that to really make the game function the way it's intended to function.
Yeah, one thing I noticed too, and I'll be dropping some pictures of the terrain off to the side here, is I was kind of going through pictures that I had of the tournaments you've been to, that you've hosted, and I would say usually, even though every terrain board looked very different, like you may have one orc terrain board and one industrial, terrain board and things like that, generally it was like about 6 ruins obscuring, pretty decently sized, then maybe 2 forests and 2 craters. And that was somewhat consistent. Some you have a little bit more, some you have a little bit less. But I really liked how different the terrain looked, even though sometimes the terrain was very similar styles. The whole board and the actual spacing and the placement was very different on all of them. And I think that added a lot of replayability as you went through the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have a guy that prints my craters for me, so I have nice big craters for every table. I try to keep it somewhat abstract with the forest, because last thing you want to do is say, okay, well I'm on this forest base, but the trees there's only like 2 trees. Are they obscuring? Are they not? Da 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 da. So I keep it abstract and really play off of the way Tectonic did the pro tabletop terrain. Their forest boards are pieces of layered MDF, and that represents a forest, keeping it abstract. And I think that the game really benefits from that non-linear abstract thinking.
Yeah, and I like just the different styles and like functionality of the terrain. So definitely a huge fan of that. So in the same line of terrain, one of the things that I've heard a lot about for bigger tournaments is it becomes an issue of storage because you have so much terrain for so many tables. So how are you solving that problem? You said like over 25 tables?
I've got probably close to 30 tables if you lay it out, and that's with some of them being kind of light, some of them being kind of heavy. But if you lay it out the way I would want to play on a tournament table, I've got probably 25 to 30 tables, and that's not including the fantasy style terrain that I have, because I've got several tables that are geared more towards Age of Sigmar than 40k, and that's something that I'll be getting into as well, is Age of Sigmar events in the future. So, but as far as storage goes, I'm sorry, I forgot the question I was reaching for.
Just like, where is that all being stored? Like all this terrain, is it in a garage, just totally filled?
Well, it's at the cool place, man.
Oh, really?
So it's all in totes. I have, if you've been to the cool place, so you know those wood tables that I have. I built 3 large wood tables, and I put that middle shelf, in a position to where I can get a 27-gallon tote underneath. Those black Commander totes that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, they're black with a yellow lid. 27 gallons. I can get 3 on the bottom and 3 on the shelf. So that's 6 per table. So that's 18, and then I stack the rest up against the wall.
Okay, that's pretty good.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
And so one of the things I noticed too is for the tournaments, you'll pre-pick missions. So I'll come in, and before I even showed up to the day, I know that round 1 is, vital intelligence. Round 2 is priority objective, or whatever the scenario is. So how did you choose those specific ones? You had to pick 5 out of the 9 or whatever.
Right. So what I did, and I've changed the mission sets that I've chosen with the change in chapter approved. If you look at the GT missions, you have several that are really hard to play on, or really hard to get the game started on, because you're having to measure out deployment zones. They're not the full table edge, or and everyone hates Vanguard Strike. Everyone hates Vanguard Strike. So I don't even take the diagonal deployment, the Vanguard Strike.
Vanguard Strike? Is that just, you say it's just diagonal?
That's the diagonal deployment, right? No one likes to have to measure that out. I think Games Workshop did everyone a solid by putting the actual measurements this time in chapter approved, or in the last chapter approved. But I just stay away from that. So I try to use Hammer and Anvil. I try to use Dawn of War, and I try to I use Search and Destroy a lot. That's the table quarters. So it. Sorry, my minion is getting me.
It's all good.
Dawn of War, Hammer and Anvil, and Search and Destroy, so the table quarters, really makes it a lot easier for you to plan out. And that's why I release them early. I try to release them a week or 2 early, which reminds me I've been slacking. I haven't released the missions for the RTT on Sunday. I'll need to do that today. But by releasing them early, it gives a player a chance to say, all right, this is how I'm going to set it up. This is how I might deploy. Once they come into the event, the first round's kind of iffy because they're not going to know what the terrain looks like. But once they come into the venue, and I've got all my tables set up, and that's why I have them set up the day before, so they can come in and have a look before and have a game plan going into round 1 even. How am I going to deploy on this table? It's something that I anticipate most TOs doing, and I really have a hard time when some TOs don't do it. You get there and they're still working on setting up tables, or they haven't released missions, or and I think this is the worst of all, is when you get to an event and they say, okay, you're going to roll on your missions. Yeah. That's not cool. Everyone should be playing the same mission. Yeah. So that's what I do. I try to keep it in line with how I would want to play it, So when I go to a tournament, I want to be able to have my player packet and know what missions I'm going to play. So I do the same thing.
Yeah, I like that. It sounds like you do a lot of prep work beforehand, before anyone even walks in. Terrain is set up, things people are ready to go. They already know what their tournament is, or their mission is, and I think that makes it just go a lot smoother in the mornings.
And it's a labor of love, man. It's a labor of love. I love 40K. I love hosting events. I love seeing all my friends. I haven't seen some of these people in years with COVID and everything going on, and making new friends. You've been to 2 of my events now, 2 of my GTs. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of sad when you didn't come to the one in January.
Yeah, I had COVID then, so I probably best.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you didn't come, but I'm sad that you weren't there.
Yeah.
So, but that's what 40K is to me. Is not just it's a camaraderie thing, right? You get to come together with your friends and play games all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's totally good. And obviously, you've had a lot of success in growing this tournament over time, with your most recent one having, like you said, 84 bodies there. So how are you able to grow this tournament over time, starting from your humble beginnings to reaching major status now?
So, really, because it was a team event, it was a GT because there was only 28 teams, but there was major status players there, right? So, I started with an RTT, and said, okay, this is what worked, and I asked for feedback. What can I do to make it better? And I changed those things. And then I had a GT, and people showed up. I filled that GT up, and then I opened slots and filled up again, and opened slots and filled up again. I think we ended up launching that one with 32 players, last minute drops, due to COVID. But it's about evolving, and it's about listening to what your players are saying, not just hey, did you have a good time? Yeah, I had a good time. But there's certain things that are going to get players to come back. I think the most important is sportsmanship, right? So if I let people come in and act like crazy fools and pick fights and cheat and try to say, oh, well, I didn't realize that it worked like that, I must have read it wrong, stuff like that, people aren't going to want to keep coming back to events where they have to deal with those kind of players. So I try to keep that squashed, right? Another super important thing, and especially in the South, is not just the venue, but how cool we can keep the venue, right? So cramming 84 players into the cool place was a litmus test that I don't think went so well. It was hot. It wasn't the cool, crisp 70 degrees it normally is in there with the GT, but we had double the amount of players, and I've already got a fix for that for the next one, for the next large event that I'm going to have, and I think that's going to be in January or February. I'll host a major, but you have to know the limits and capabilities of your venue, right? The cool place has something very that's a great draw, and I think it's one of the reasons why people keep coming back, is they have so much to do. If you're not playing, you can go get in some quick VR time, or you can shoot a game of pool, or you can belly up to the bar and have a beer, So we have those things working for us at the cool place, and that's why I continue to host events there. We're in a great central location, but sportsmanship is the biggest thing in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting. I when you said that, I mean, it sounds like some of the two biggest things there you talked about was, one, holding people accountable and making sure it's a good, clean, event, and then also the venue having all this extra stuff to do, and and it's interesting to hear that, because when I was originally thinking like, what type of answer would you give to that question, I would think of like, I posted to Facebook a lot, and I asked my friends to come, or things like that. And you really were focusing on just making the best event possible. And then it sounds like people just, told everyone else, and they just showed up,
Well, I mean, and I post those events over and over and over and over again. I'll get on my phone and I'll post in 7 or 8 different Facebook groups, 40K related, at once, right? Just post one right after the other. And that drives it keeps it fresh in people's mind. But what we're looking at is the same people are coming back over and over and over again, right? I have Chris Frost. Shout out to my boy Chris. He's been to every single one of my GTs. Why? Not because we're friends, but because he likes to play 40K. He likes to come up and hang out with his friends and drink beer, and it's a great venue. And, I don't slouch when it comes to prizes. I don't. I put in a ton into prize support. And it's generally always store credit, and that's something that's going to change as well. But, people aren't going to want to drive 3 hours from Atlanta to play for, a box of Marines. Which is why we do store credit. Here, what do you want? What do you want me to order? I'll get it for you. You have this much money. I'll ship it to you at for a nominal fee. I'll ship it to you. So, that's another thing. For that team event, we had, like I said, 84 players. We did over $3,500 in prize support.
That's huge.
I did $275 for sportsmanship. I mean, who does that aside from me? I mean, what is it? And that's one of the things that we need. And I'll harp on sportsmanship all the time, right? It's my favorite award to give, and I want to ask people in front of the people that they're playing or other players, who's your favorite opponent? Who's your most sportsmanlike opponent? And I've done it to you. I'll come up to you mid game and ask you, and I want people to listen for that. If you're playing a game and someone comes up and says, "Who is your best opponent?" and you say someone other than me, then I'm not playing the game right. There's something wrong there. So that's why I make it about sportsmanship, and I've got some crazy plans for sportsmanship going on that you'll see on Sunday at the RTT, and I'm really excited for them.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about that. And I also think, too, we were talking about this before we started recording, is how cool I think it is that you not only have a sportsman award, but such reward for doing it. And it's a big part of the end of the ceremony. It's like, best general, best painted, best sportsman. And they're all kind of like, together in that hobby trifecta.
Yeah. So third place at that team event got $200 apiece. Sportsmanship got $275. Right? And I do that for a reason. We have a habit of focusing on negative, on the TJ Lanigan issues and the issues with Tony Grapondo and Aaron A. Long when they had those issues years ago. And I'm not throwing shade by naming names, but these are the incidents that people remember, right? And I don't want that. I don't want to foster that. I don't want to keep spreading that and having that cancer grow, right? So the only way to do that is to promote the opposite side. If you make it to where winning that sportsmanship is as good or better than winning the GT or the RTT or whatever, people are going to police themselves a little bit better. They're going to say, "Oh, well, I want to win that sportsmanship. I want to win that fancy glass. I want to get all that store credit. I want to get those models, whatever. I really need this, so if I win the sportsmanship, then I might be able to get it." So by focusing on the positives of things versus the negatives, I find that I don't have to have that many conversations about, "Hey, stop cheating your opponents," or, "Hey, read all of the stratagem before you play it." I don't have to have that conversation. Obviously, you're going to have it. But I don't have to have it as much. And it's great. It's great.
Yeah, I think that's just a very mature way of handling the issue instead of just focusing on how do you punish the bad seeds. It's how do you reward the good people.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's just an awesome way to do it. And then, so one of the things you mentioned too is getting feedback from some of your earlier tournaments. Is there any other type of feedback that you got that you acted on that maybe some newer judges or TOs might not know?
Well, everything's going to be situational, obviously, right? So it's going to depend on your venue. It's going to depend on your prize support and the size of event that you're going to have and your demographic, right? So if you're playing a game, if you're playing an event in, I don't know, a little north on the East Coast where some of the other the big name players are, like Sean Naden and all those guys, great guys, all of them. I know them. I've talked to them. I'm sure they don't know who I am, and I am okay with that, right? But it's going to be a higher level of game. It's going to be higher stakes, right? Because they don't want people to say, "Oh, hey, you're a loser. You're such a great player, and you lost all these games." No. So what I want to do is I want to make my events good enough for players like Sean Naden and Nick Nanavati to come to my events, right? Nick Nanavati lives right down the road from us, right? He lives in Tallahassee now. I've had everyone from Art of War just about that lives in Tallahassee come to my events with the exception of Nick and Richard. And Richard has an excuse, but Nick keeps promising he's going to come. But Nick, I'm calling you out. Come to my next event. But hey, something you think I can change for my event, let me know. Let me see what I can do. And I just make myself available to take that feedback. And I'll take it in person. I'll take it via email or Facebook Messenger, whatever. However you want to reach out and get in touch with me and give me feedback, do it. And I'll do my best to implement change. I had some of it was about spacing, right? A lot of people don't want to rub another dude's butt when they're playing 40K. So I moved my tables out a little bit further, added some spacing, I'm actively looking at new venues. I'm having a 22-player RTT on Sunday in Valdosta in a 5,000 square foot auditorium. No butts will be rubbed.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Looking forward to it for sure.
Right? So it's going to be huge. And I think that's a big thing that people have to, especially TOs now, have to worry about is social distancing. We are still in the midst of a pandemic, whether people I don't care what you think about it. It's still going on. We need to keep people's opinions and comfort in mind, right? My events, for the most part, are mask required. Unless we're in such a big facility and there's so few of us that I can adequately space you. I work in the medical field. I know how much space I want, and that's what I'm going to give you, right? Unfortunately, with 84 players in the cool place, we didn't have that spacing. And I had some players that had mentioned that they were uncomfortable about it, and the owners had mentioned it. So I said, all right, we're going to go mask on. I can't control anyone else in the store, but I can control the 84 of you that are playing 40K not wearing your mask on. So put your mask on. And there were some grumbles, but I explained to them why, and they did. And I got a lot of feedback afterwards. Hey, thanks for doing that, but it's not just, you didn't just say, hey, put your mask on. You went table to table and you said, hey, can you put your mask on? This is what's going on. This is why I'm asking you to put your mask on. I really need you to put your mask on. And there was, hey, one guy came to me and said, hey, I heard you tell that guy you were going to give him a yellow card if he didn't put his mask on, because you had already told him. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks for following through. So, that's the kind of stuff that you need to focus on. You need to focus on listening to your players and not just saying, okay, yeah, sure, and then throwing that bit of criticism to the wind. You've got to build yourself up, right? You got to make yourself better.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. And I think even at the last GT I was at, I heard two people give you feedback on the terrain, and they were exactly opposite. One guy says, too much terrain, I couldn't even play on my army. He lost. Maybe it was a bias there. And then somebody else comes up and says, too little terrain, I got shot off. And they were like the same table. And it's, you have to sift through that,
No, they weren't. I know what tables you're talking about. I know what games you're talking about, and they weren't the same table. But some of it is, you're going to have heavy tables. Mm. You're going to have lighter tables. It is what it is. If you can't alter your strategy and alter your game to play on a lighter table and on a heavy set table with some success, then, I had a guy playing on, had a guy bring a falchion, and a falchion is a huge model, right? It's a big Baneblade chassis. You know how big those things are. And he couldn't move it because there was so much terrain on the table. So you had to basically place it, and he couldn't really go anywhere else with it, right? But he played his game, and I think he ended up losing that game anyway. But I don't think that was the falchion's fault. But then I had a player say, oh, well, you've got way too much terrain on this table. Okay, all the other players that have played on this table haven't said a word about that. All the players that played on the exact same layout at the team tournament, no one said anything about it. So, people are going to complain if they lose a game. Yeah, they're going to find something to blame it on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But you gotta be able to separate the wheat from the chaff on that.
Yeah, for sure. Like all feedback in life. Okay, and so the next question, last one I have for tournament organization in general is, so what advice do you have for someone who's just starting their own tournament scene and trying to get into tournament organization?
Ask for help. Ask for help. Absolutely. That is the best bit of advice I could give you, is to ask for help. There are the ITC forum, the TO forum for ITC. I'm the ITC regional rep for Georgia, and I have a chat on Facebook with all of the Georgia TOs that we're kicking questions back and forth all the time. I know Florida does the same thing. But ask for help. A lot of these TOs have been doing this for years. I've not been hosting tournaments for a year. Mm-hmm. My first tournament was September of last year. So, I'm coming up on that 1 year mark, and I want to continue going. And that's what my startup is all about, is running events in South Georgia where there's not any. But if you ask for help, you will get it. And I'm on Facebook, I'm on ITC, on the ITC TO forum. You got questions, ask me. I'll be glad to answer them. Give you the best advice I can give you. If I don't have an answer, I'll get it for you, or I'll help you get someone that can get it. But there's some great guys like Reggie Sanchez in South Florida that has his hands in Crucible. I shoot him terrain layouts all the time, and he says, no, I don't want to play on that. That's light. Let's do something better. So, I'll change it up and send him. He's like, yeah, that's the stuff right there. So, it's about getting help, man. You can't do it all by yourself. I try, and it doesn't work sometimes. But you got to ask for help sometimes.
Yeah,
you got to ask for help all the time.
Yeah, definitely asking for help. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of things, like everything from how do you get BCP to work to registering an event to where to buy terrain. So, I mean, like you said, there's people out there who are willing to help you and answer questions. And, I think the Warhammer community in general is it's very helpful. I've been blown away at how helpful people are. Yeah.
And again, with that especially, you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. But I mean, BCP, how do you run BCP? I don't know. I'm still learning things on BCP.
Yeah.
So everyone likes to give the guys at BCP a hard time. I'm not got anything bad to say about them. Every time I screw something up, they fix it for me, so I'm good there. Terrain is available from a ton of different places, ton of different vendors. The only thing I can say on that though is be careful when you're buying terrain, especially with ninth. You have terrain that's not really conducive to tournament play. Case in point, I have a bunch of Death Ray Designs terrain, and I absolutely love it because the detail work is fantastic on a lot of this terrain. But some of it is not great for tournament play. They have some bunkers and such that are closed off. And ninth just doesn't lend to magic boxes, right? So those I'm actually going to cycle out of my tournament terrain as I replace them. And I have a huge amount of terrain I still have to build, but it's all about finding that happy medium and finding what you like. I will say there are terrain manufacturers out there that will cut you a deal if you tell them you're hosting an event. If you're a TO and you need some terrain for the event, Death Ray Designs is one of them. They've been really helpful to me with hooking me up with a couple of discounts here and there. And I will tell you, I've spent a lot of money on terrain. But every little bit counts. But they'll get you set up with their ruined cities buildings, and those are really, really good, really nice detailed terrain with bases, and that's the big thing. A lot of these terrain kits don't come with bases, and you really want to, especially with ninth, you want a base on them. But yeah, terrain's not fun.
Yeah, no, that's all good advice. I mean, it sounds kind of like the summary of that is, ask for help, get terrain, get help about terrain, but just do it, and it'll grow over time and take feedback from people.
You can't. If I held off and didn't hold an event until I thought I was ready, I still wouldn't have had my first event, right? You gotta be forged in that crucible. You gotta. Sometimes you just gotta say, "Well, send it," right? And you just gotta try your best. And if it means calling and asking for help, call and ask for help. If you need terrain, call someone that has terrain and say, "Hey, can you help me? I didn't have enough terrain to fill the tables that I wanted to fill for this team event, so I reached out." Robert Chandler from Dothan brought me 10 tables and mats. So that was a huge help, My buddy Chris Frost and Cody Saltz out of Tallahassee, they brought me 6 tables and mats. And a friend of mine from Atlanta brought terrain as well. And that's what it's about. That's what this is all about, is getting the help that you need. If you want to run a good event, you can't do it by yourself. You're gonna have to get help unless you're in an established location, like running out of a store that's already got all the terrain, and had run tournaments before and is set up to hold events at this size, if you're starting off, you're going to have to get help. And if you're in the southeast and you're within, a few hours drive of me, I will bring you terrain to use. I don't have a problem lending my terrain out as long as I get it back in the same quality I get it out to, of course. But, but that's what it's about, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now what I'd like to do is dive into more of the actual execution of the event, the judging portion of it. So first question, and this is, an issue that I have as being kind of one of the newer players too, is that there are so many rules in Warhammer 40k, and there's constantly new rules, FAQs, drip feeding, white dwarfs, all this type of stuff. So How does a person get to the point where they're confident enough to be a judge? Like, what resources are you using to do that?
You don't. You can't ever get comfortable with this, right? So I'll read the rule book, and I'll read it again, and I'll read it again, and I'll read it again, and there's still things that I miss, or that I misinterpret, or that I interpret differently than someone else. You can't keep up with the way Games Workshop is doing their facts and chapter approved and codices every well, they've slowed down because of COVID, but they're releasing new information at such an alarming rate that it's hard to keep up. But I've found that, and this is something that'll be implemented at all of my events going forward, is the easiest way is to say, all right, if you're going to play this rule set, you're going to play this game, you're going to play this army, you have to have your physical rules in your hand, right? If you're going to play this out of a Warzone book, Warzone Caradon book, you got to have that Warzone Caradon book. If you're going to play these stratagems out of Psychic Awakening, I need you to have that Psychic Awakening because not everyone has them. Mm-hmm. Going back into the 8th edition stuff like Psychic Awakening stuff that's still valid, and the 8th edition codices that haven't been replaced yet. Yes, all of that stuff is in the Warhammer app, but not everyone has that app. Not everyone wants that app. I have it, and I like it. I don't know if I'm in the minority or the majority on that, but it's a great tool. But there's still so much information being released, and the way it's getting dropped in with the facts, especially, and the erratas. They're not going in they're not updating the core rulebook to change it. They're just saying, all right, you have your core rulebook, but now you have all of these facts that you also have to read. And I think that's something where Games Workshop could improve, like they did with when they were selling the digital codices and such. They would go back and change that and update it. They're not doing that now, and I wish that they would. But you can't get comfortable fully. At least I can't. There are some players that are just absolute savants and know every aspect of the rules and how to play every single rule. But if you ask me a question that I don't know, I'll straight up tell you, I don't know. I'll get you an answer. Give me a minute. Mm-hmm. And I'm not ashamed to say that I'll ask my other players. I have such a high caliber player base. With Mark Perry and John Lennon and Cody Saltz and Reggie Sanchez and all those that come to my events, I don't have a problem asking them a question. Hey, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt your game, but is this a thing? Am I interpreting this correctly? Mm-hmm. And they'll say yes or no, or they'll give me an answer, or they'll explain it to me, and off I go. But a lot of it right now is how Games Workshop is writing the rules. Leads to ambiguity.
Yeah, so let's say, two players are kind of like having a rules dispute or, something like that. Nothing like crazy, but just like, I think it's this way, I think it's this way. What's your go-to to kind of solve that?
So I try to keep everything civil, right? I'm going to talk to you with the same amount of respect that I expect you to talk to me with. And I want you to carry that over to your opponent as well. If it's as simple as, hey, I have this ability and he's got this ability, I think mine cancels out his. Fight first is a huge point of contention with a lot of people right now when you have so many different things that that allow you to fight first, like the Incarn or Slaneshi units, Slanesh demons. Um, and now they treat charging as a fight first ability, right? So you have to understand how those things interact. And if you don't, or you interpret something different than someone else, obviously there's going to be a point of contention. But you reach out to ICC if you want, or you reach out to the tournament forum, the TO forum, and a lot of those guys are pretty quick with their responses. But I've only had one instance where I've had to like really get involved in a game, and it was at the team event, and it was in day two where stakes are a little bit higher. Mm-hmm. People are a little more focused on winning, and it was an issue with measurement, and both players ended up moving models, and I said, okay, well, there's no way to know now, so this is going to be my ruling. Mm-hmm. Well, they before I could get there, they were arguing back and forth, and I said, all right, look, neither one of you say another word. Shut your mouths, don't say another word. And I had to raise my voice a little bit so they would, realize, hey, look, I'm serious. I want you to stop talking. And I explained to them what I had seen, what I had thought, and said, this is the way it's going to be. So pause your clock. I don't want either one of you to do anything else until I get back. I'm going to go grab my stuff real quick, and I'm going to camp out here with you at this table for the rest of your game, because you guys have created contention, and I want you to have a good, clean game, and I don't want anyone to think that anyone is taking advantage of them. So, and those two players were model players up until that point and after that point. So, they were fine. You just have to know how to deal with them. I have kids, so I think that prepares me for some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a criticism I've heard about, Warhammer players before, is that they're not, they're afraid of confrontation. But some of the times, you can't be afraid. You have to just say, hey, this is it. I'm the TO here. I'm the judge, and this is how it is, and that's how it's going to be.
And there's also those that want to be super passive. Well, you're the TO, so I'll go with whatever you say, but but I think that this is no buts. If I'm the TO and you go with what I say, there's no buts. there's no qualifiers on that. If you acknowledge the fact that I am the TO and that what I say goes, that's it. Don't say anything else. Mm-hmm. Let me say what I'm going to say, and don't say another word. Play your game.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. So one of the things I also want to talk about briefly, too, is that the ITC just came out with an updated code of conduct, and I know you're putting that in full effect for this weekend. Do you have any kind of opinions on that, or things you like, things you don't like?
Honestly, I love it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely love it. Because now, the yellow card and the red card, and they've modeled the code of conduct off of soccer, right? And Mr. Solis, the head ITC judge, will tell you the same thing. It was modeled after soccer with the card system and all of that. It's great, but I'm getting a yellow card. Big deal. Mm-hmm. People don't care. I don't give cards very often. I've given a couple, but people don't really. It doesn't really bother them. I've found, right? And it's kind of a joke in certain circles. Oh, I got a yellow card. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, now, not just a yellow card. You submitted your list late. Guess what? Now you got a yellow card and a 20-point deduction from round one. Now you're personally invested in making sure that you're doing things the way you're supposed to be doing them. All of my events, your lists are due the week before the event, period. Done. Unless there's something huge going to happen that's going to change things. I pushed my deadline for the team event out a little bit further to 2 weeks. The Sisters Codex came out on the day of release. So I moved my deadline up a couple of days. I moved it to Monday instead of Saturday, so people would have time to get their books and have a look. Of course, not a full, complete look, but still. But people being able to say, "Oh, well, big deal," the consequences didn't really affect them. So now saying, okay, well, you do this, you're going to lose points. That's the way it should be. And a lot of this stuff was old and was carryover, but they've just added the points difference to it, right? Now you take the negative points. I love it. I think it's great, and it's all up to the TO or to the judge. So you submitted your let's say, for instance, Dan, you submitted your list late. It's up to me whether or not I want to give you that.
I thought it was on the 4th. I thought it was it close of business?
For instance.
Okay.
No. I'm not saying you should. Come on now. You know you didn't submit it late. You know. I emailed you actually. I sent you a message and told you to submit your late. So I mean, and I always try to do that. Mm-hmm. And if you don't submit your list, and I have no other way to contact you, BCP has a send list reminder button, and I'll mash it. And then I'll mash it again, and I'll mash it again. I'll mash it again until you submit it. I don't want people submitting lists late, but the reason why I set my due date out a week from the event is because I want to unlock those lists so you can see what you're going to play, right? So you can have a look ahead of time at the field. RTTs, I know it doesn't make that big of a deal, right? Because they're just, they're an RTT, but I still like to do that. I like to be fair and even across the board. But what I was saying is, for instance, if you had submitted your list late, I could say, you're getting a yellow card, but I'm not going to give you that 20-point deduction. You could call and say, hey, look, man, I was on a late flight, or my CO had me doing this, or whatever, and you could have a great excuse. And because of that, I may be lenient with you. Just know, in fact, listeners, that I won't be that lenient with people. You're going to get a point deduction if you submit a list late to my event. But there's really that now those players that want to bend the rules and that want to bend the time clock to their advantage, or bend questioning their opponents to their advantage, because a lot of people will do that, and I've had people do it to me. And matter of fact, I had a buddy of mine at ATC request to use a time clock on his game, and his opponent was very upset with him and refused to use a time clock. He was playing orcs. Well, guess what? You want to play with 300 models, you need to know how to play with 300 models in an efficient manner to give your opponent the same amount of time. That's a thing. That's a thing that's going to be, right? But the addition of the point subtraction, I think, is a great thing, and I think it'll go to sober a lot of these people up, right? If you take a 10-point reduction, if you look at GT scores, you'll notice that 10 points could be the difference between first and like fifth, right? That's a huge swing. So they're not going to want to put that, in my opinion, they're not going to want to put that on the line. So arguing with a judge carries a 10-point deduction. That's something I may be a little bit lenient on, right? Because I'm an easygoing guy, and I'm not perfect. I don't understand all of the rules to the same extent that say John Lennon does. But if you argue with me in a civil manner and don't come at me hot and like ready to throw down with me, then there's a difference, right? But if you keep questioning your opponent and causing contention with your opponent and trying to eat up your opponent's clock, then you're going to get carded and you're going to get a point deduction, because there has to be a tangible consequence, right? Unless they're going to let me throw weighted beanbags at people's faces. I don't know why they frown on that. They don't want me to do that. I'm just kidding. I would never. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I think it's going to be great for the community going forward. I think it's going to be great for especially the larger events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, at least in my opinion too. Like when I play a game of Warhammer 40k, I want the only game to be that game of Warhammer 40k taking place on a table. None of this. Well, I'll submit my list late so I can look at the things and
Yeah.
put something or like table talk or like stalling. It's all like I don't want to play any of those games. I want to play the board game and that's it.
Yeah.
None of these silly mind games.
Now I will say, I think the number of people that submit lists late solely for the benefit of teching their list to the players that are going to be there, I think those instances are few. I think it has more to do with accountability and responsibility. When I post an event on BCP or on Facebook, I put it in there, hey, this is your deadline for list submission. This is your deadline for codex and fax cutoffs. This is when money is due, da-da-da-da-da. Because of reasons, right? I want to go through and look at the lists. I want you to be able to go through and look at the lists because I'm not perfect. I don't own every codex. So I'm not going to catch some of these things. There were a couple of illegal lists that slipped through that I missed for the tournament that other people caught and said, oh, hey, by the way, this is not a legal list. This was changed in a fact that came down or whatever. So I had to go through and say, hey, look, you got to change these. But the community as a whole is great at policing themselves. So what you might make an illegal choice in your list and not realize it. Someone else may pick it up if I miss it. Someone else may pick it up. I'm not going to be the one that goes through. If BCP will tell me if your list passes or fails legality, right? And it's not perfect. Not perfect. There's always some faults. But BCP will say, hey, look, it passed list inspection or it failed. If it fails, I'm going to look at it a little more hard, right? Put a little more scrutiny into it. But, I don't have time to look at 84 lists in depth, right? So.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay, I've got a few more questions for you here. The next one, a little bit of a contentious topic, and that's kind of just cheating in general. So can you talk to me at all about that? Like, have you had to give red cards before?
I've never red carded anyone. Never red carded anyone. I think that's a pretty crappy thing to have to do, and I hope I don't ever have to red card anyone. Luckily, we're in an area that doesn't draw that kind of player, right? I feel, but I've had to issue a couple of yellow cards. And I always do it very discreetly, and I don't ever advertise or tell anyone other than the player that's getting the yellow card, hey, you're getting a yellow card. Or, hey, this person got a yellow card. I try to keep that between me and that player. But I also want my players to know, hey, I'm tracking your tendencies. I'm tracking your sportsmanship. I remember when people complain about you. I remember what my wife was wearing the day we met in 2011. I'm going to remember when you came to one of my events and cheated. I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to watch you. And if you make it a habit, you're not coming to my events. And as the Georgia rep for ITC, I'm going to let all of the Georgia TOs know, hey, look, this player is doing this at my events. Have you had any problems with the same player? Yes, we have. Okay, well, now we can advance it a little bit further. You can lose points. You can lose all of your ITC points. You can lose points for that event. It's not a thing that we want to do. And like I said earlier, I don't want to focus on the negative. I don't want to focus on people cheating. If they catch you cheating, you're not going to like the responses. You're not going to like the results. But I want to focus on sportsmanship. Sportsmanship is the gold mine. That's where it's at. At my events, you win sportsmanship, you get prizes. That's where it's at. Come to my events, be a great player, be a great sport, you'll be rewarded.
Yeah, I think you've talked about it before too, where the community polices itself, especially if you make things open and ask for best sports, and people will help police themselves. Okay, the next question here is what is like the hardest part about being a judge? Like what advice would you have for an aspiring judge?
What I would say to anyone that wants to be a judge or a TO, as far as this goes, is don't be afraid to upset someone, right? There's going to be a rules dispute. Someone's going to misinterpret or interpret something different than you. You can't be afraid to upset them or to offend them. You've got to stand your ground. When you're right, you're right. You're the TO, you're the judge, you're the call, right? Um, it comes back to those. Well, you're the TO, so I'll follow your judgment. I'll go with your call, but you're gonna have someone inevitably is going to end up with the case of the feel bads. And what I try to do is if I have that situation, I'll pull that player aside and say, hey, look, I know you're upset. I know you're not happy with this call that I made. If I did something that affected you negatively, I'm sorry, but I've got to run this event. And this is the call. This is why I made that call. I'm not explaining myself to you and looking for redemption from you, but I want you to fully understand why I made this call this way, and that it was not to intentionally affect your game negatively or to upset you. We have a lot of that going on, and I try not to offend anyone, but ultimately, I'm not a young kid. I know someone's going to get offended for everything.
Yeah, yeah. And so my last question for you too, because the vast majority of people, we're not tournament organizers, we're not judges, but we are players at tournaments. So I guess my last question for you is, what do you wish players would do more of? Like, what is your kind of ideal player, as a judge in TO?
I'm not saying this to toot your horn or to swell your ego there, Dan, but you're the kind of player that I want coming to my events.
Thank you.
Right? You're the kind of player that I want coming to my events because I know I'm not going to have to worry about watching you or are you playing an honest game? Are you playing a square game? The only thing I'm concerned about with you is, are you going to keep coming to my events? Are you having a good enough time? And that's what this is, man. This is a game. Mm-hmm. This is a game. Sure, I want to offer big prizes so a lot more people will come. And with that, you're going to have people that are more of a competitive nature. But this is a game ultimately, right? And it's intended to be fun. Regardless of how ambiguous Games Workshop writes their rules, this game is intended to be fun, right? And I've spent a lot of time playing my stepfather and having him kick my teeth down my throat. But he's still my best friend. I said my stepfather, but I meant my father-in-law. Mm-hmm. He's still my best friend, and I still want to play him all the time, right? And that's what we want, is we want you to keep playing. We want you to keep coming to events. As long as you guys come to my events, I'm going to keep holding them. I'm going to make it worth your while if you come, but I want the players that are coming to play for fun, not just the players that are coming to play for first place or for imaginary internet points or whatever. I want people to come and have fun. The competitive players are a big part of the community, but the players that come to play a better game and to have fun doing it, I think are the most important part of the community.
Okay. Yeah, those are all my questions. I mean, do you have any plugs you want to put in?
I got a shout out to my favorite venue, the Cool Place in Albany, Georgia. We are the second largest game store in Georgia that we're aware of. We are the largest in Southwest Georgia. You guys are always welcome to come down and hang out. I'm typically in there every other weekend. Look out for my events. I will be posting them all over Facebook. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to run events. Eventually, I want to run events from the Florida-Georgia line up to the Macon and maybe a little bit further north on the 75 corridor. I'm always looking to expand and bring tournaments to other areas in Southeast Georgia. I think it's a great community. We have a lot of good players, and it's really easy to get to. So, and as always, Dan, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to sit here and talk your ear off. I appreciate it. And if you have been to one of my events and you had a good time, great on you. If there's something you didn't like, please reach out to me and let me know, because I would love to get you to come back to an event and change that for you.
Yeah, I totally agree, Rob. Absolute blast having you on. A lot of good information from not only sportsmanship to, all the, practical details about terrain and judging.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of great wisdom there, and I highly recommend anyone to go to his tournaments. They're the best tournaments that I've been to.
How many tournaments have you been to that weren't mine, though, Dan?
One, but still counts. Still counts.
It does count. It does count, and I will take the compliment and I will run with it. I appreciate it.
Yeah.